I'll introduce myself because I'm the only guy around to do the introductions. My name's Kevin Yallup. I'm the CTO for ACAMP. As I've probably mentioned already, ACAMP stands for Alberta Centre for Advanced MNT or Micro and Nanotechnology Products. And our role is to help people commercialize MNT products. I've been involved in the technology transfer industry effectively for the last 25 to 30 years, working first in semiconductors, but much more, but for the last 15 to 20 years or so in microtechnology, where I've taken a lot of products from idea through to end market. So really so today I'd like to talk about some of the things we could potentially do to help people working in the clean tech area. And I'm going to focus on, we can do a lot of different things. I'm going to focus on one particular technology that I'm quite interested in at the moment, which is microfluidics. We're doing a lot of projects already in terms of cost reduction and efficiency improvements for the oil extraction industry, but that's a different stream, and I might just briefly refer to that later on if I get time. So the two things are going to be, first of all, I'd like to talk a bit about microfluidics and how it might be applied in clean tech. And then I'd like to say a little bit about how we can help people commercialize new microfluidic products into the clean tech area, in fact, new products in general. So what is microfluidics? The last speaker gave us a very interesting talk about some of the interesting microscopic mechanisms that we need to try and understand to better design microfluidic devices, and in fact, I might be talking to him later on about how we might access some of that knowledge to improve our design processes. But microfluidics, there are lots of different definitions for it. It's an emerging technology that's really based on leveraging some of the newer manufacturing techniques to produce highly cost-effective devices that can carry out complex chemical processes on a single chip. My favorite definition is really the manipulation, processing, and measurement of fluids on a micro scale. And by micro, I mean typically on the order of a few hundred microns or less. So these are pretty small structures we're building here. And primarily, it's aimed at processing fluids. Because of the nature of the very small structures, this is typically we can't process solids, although we can include small particles in this as well. They can be part of the fluid flow. So here's a schematic. This is for courtesy of the University of Lausanne in Switzerland of a typical microfluidic device, just to give a flavor for the kind of thing we can do. And this includes some ability to input fluids onto the chips that we can do. This may be a species you want to analyze, or it may be something you want to process. A processing section where we can carry out some reactions. We can heat things up with microelectrodes. We can cause reactions to happen and produce a result. And then an analysis section where we actually go ahead and do some sort of analysis that tells us that we found something that's important to us for a technological reason. So you can see there's quite a bit of processing here. The fluidic activities going on the chip. There's electronic inputs, potentially optical interaction as well in order to do the analysis work. So these are really complete systems on a chip. So why do people want to use microfluidics? What's the benefit? Well, the real key driver is miniaturization, and that is beneficial in lots and lots of different ways. Some examples are, the first thing that really is important, this has been important in the medical industry, perhaps not so important for environmental industry, but it could still be, is the ability to process very small volumes. When you only have a very small volume of the thing you're trying to analyze, it's much easier to do it on a microfluidic chip because there you're only analyzing and processing very small volumes in the first place. You can also achieve much tighter control of all the processes on the chip by dealing with just by the very physical nature of the microfluidic chips. You can control everything to a much higher degree of accuracy and improve things like process yield, or you can sense things that are otherwise difficult to sense using macroscopic reactions. Integration of single systems on a chip, well, we've already seen that, the ability to actually produce a complete system on a chip. And this chip, if we do it right, can be very low cost and potentially disposable. So now we have the ability to go out into the field with a bunch of disposable chips and do analyses using a lab, essentially, for each particular analysis. This brings out the concept of lab on a chip, which is really where a lot of the stuff that we're doing in microfluidics is targeted at the moment. So really, can we put all this is a typical chemistry lab, onto a chip? And the answer is not really. We can do several things on the chip, but a chemistry lab has lots and lots of functions, as you can see from this picture. It includes things like bulk reagent storage, complex analytical instruments, which are pretty expensive and would be quite hard to reproduce on a chip. It has got some fluid processing. So what do we actually put on a chip? So really what we do with a lab on a chip type device is we break it in, generally the system's broken up into two parts. There's generally a fixed instrument, which is maybe a few $1,000s in cost and can be used over and over again to do to drive the microfluidic chip, do the data analysis and report back the results to the operator. And there's a microfluidic chip, which embodies a lot of the functions I've sort of listed down here, things like transport, along channels, mixing, control of reactions, precise temperature control, separation, dispensing, and so on, in order to give you an ability to take a piece of fluid and do some reaction that leads to a significant result, which can be sensed by the instrument. And this is a typical sort of way a microfluidic chip is embodied. In fact, it's a disposable cartridge which does the smart part of the analysis, and an equally than a permanent instrument which actually enables the chip to actually function properly. So a few examples of microfluidics in cleantech, and I've picked a couple of companies that we're currently working with that could impact the cleantech area. Monitoring undesirable chemicals and organisms in the environment. This is just a rollover from a lot of the work that's being done in the medical space at the minute to trace, biomarkers. This could equally be applied to finding a whole range of undesirable chemicals and species in the environment. And an example of a company we're working with here is Aquascreen, who are developing a water quality monitoring system. They're starting off with a macroscopic version, but there is definitely a microfluidic product in the long-term roadmap there. Technologies for cleaning up water. Potentially you could use microfluidics for doing some water cleaning if you put in massively parallel micro channels, and in fact people are even talking about using this for efficient and environmentally friendly chemical production. Here's an example of actually a German company called CPC, or Cellular Process Control, I believe they call themselves, and this is their laptop version of their microfluidic reactor used for producing difficult to produce and potentially dangerous chemicals. In fact, this one's used, I think, to produce nitroglycerine for medical applications. Nitroglycerine is quite dangerous to make, as you can probably guess, if in bulk volumes, but in a microfluidic channel you're only making a couple of microliters, so if it goes bang, who cares, You just replace the channels, Other interesting areas, we've got an analysis here of a company based down in Calgary working on scaling down the whole NMR concept to produce a shoebox-sized NMR system that could be used for chemical analysis pretty much in the field or in situ, certainly on lab bench tops and so on. And there's quite a few people working on fuel cells, and I've just drawn a schematic from a typical, one of the concepts for a micro fuel cell, which could be based on a microfluidic channel, where essentially you're mixing the fuel and the oxidizing species in a very controlled manner and extracting energy very efficiently. But microfluidics can also be used in bigger fuel cells to increase the efficiency of membranes and so on by microstructuring the surface and controlling the fluid flow across the structure. And there's some fun stuff on nanoporous membranes as well. These are very useful for doing filtration or creating gels and creating colloids and so on. So lots and lots of potential activities in the microfluidics arena that could, in fact, interact with the cleantech environment. And in fact, we're hearing a few more examples later on, I think. I'm going to change gears now and just talk a little bit about ACAMP and what we can do to help people who are developing new products, microfluidics or even any other types of products, in order to turn them into real commercially successful products. And that's really our goal, is to go from research through to commercial success. So really we work with a whole range of companies, anything from university spin-outs through to fairly mature SMEs. And what we've recognized is that many of these companies are struggling with new technologies, trying to find the right application in the market and the right product to launch. So we can help them both on the side of developing the business, so product market definition, developing the right sort of business model to get the thing out to market, raising finance, but also on the more classical engineering side as well, product development, making sure that product actually meets the specifications that are required and the cost targets that are required for the market. And we have a large activity in assembly and packaging. We recognize that within the region there are actually some very strong front-end capabilities, and people can produce wonderful chips, but without the package and without assembling them, they're not going to make it into the market as a real product. So we supplement that by providing assembly and packaging capability as well. And hopefully we take our customers from where they are to success in the end markets. So our mandate then is really to help Alberta grow a globally competitive critical mass of commercial MNT device and technology companies. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's our long-term goal, is to help develop the ecosystem so there are more successful companies and more ability to flow research out of the universities and out to commercial markets. And we're doing this with three main actions, filling existing gaps in what we've recognized as existing supply chains for technology. So assembly and packaging, as I mentioned, product development and business development.